The problem is worldwide, although we like to think it's just in the Japan. It's a worldwide problem. We have a jet stream that goes all around the world within 5 to 6 days, dumping radiation all over the world, creating what we call dark rain, black rain. People are being really significantly affected. It's hard to get a lot of data on just what's happening because there's a lot of media denial. But what we do know is from a newspaper in Japan that 60% of the kids 12 years and younger now have type 2 diabetes. And there's definitely a connection between diabetes and radiation that's been shown at Chernobyl and Nagasaki and the Bimini Islands, where they've done nuclear testing. The rates of type 1 and type 2 diabetes really increase about 200%. It also has been shown to affect 28% of the newborns on the West Coast are being born with thyroid difficulties, and 44% in Japan are being born with thyroid difficulties. Now, on top of that, depression has been distinctly associated and related to radiation. So people who are in a more radiated field have higher amounts of radiation and higher amounts of depression and higher amounts of cancer as well. So it's very significant, and it is really worldwide because the jet stream goes all over the world. And it also affects us when we're flying because the jet stream is running somewhere between 25 and 35,000 feet, which is kind of where the airplanes fly. So it's important to be aware of that in terms of when you're flying that you need to do certain things. Our sources of radiation are pretty widespread. We have continual accidents and leakage from nuclear plants, from food irradiation facilities. We have the remnants of nuclear testing as well as other nuclear testing that's still even going on the planet. We're affected by a variety of CAT scans and radiation in that way, or medical diagnosis. In addition to Chernobyl, Fukushima, and actually a significant amount of radiation leaks that actually aren't really made public. So we have all kinds of radiation inputs because we're not paying attention that this whole approach is not a really healthy approach because of the human element. No matter how good these plants are, it's still humans make mistakes. The biggest thing is prevention, and there's levels of prevention. Okay, one of the things we've come across is a particular remedy that activates like the hydrogen cell battery in our cells, and I'm particularly talking about intracellular radiation, which is where the DNA is affected, and most of the instruments don't measure that. They need a very expensive instrument to measure that, and this remedy, which is a super oxygenated water with a variety of nucleotides, is a very well thought out remedy, clears in our research, it clears you of the intracellular radiation for about 2 years. Then you have to take more of it. So it's a really good, simple thing. Now, there's a thing called competitive inhibition, which is if you have enough iodine in your system, there won't be a place where radioactive iodine can go. Okay? The other thing is, and there are a lot of minerals that really compete against the radiation. So if you have adequate mineralization, it's good. You can also, and it's very important, alkalize your system, and that you're going to get more with a vegan diet and a vegan live food diet. That's another aspect of that. Also, at least in the Atlantic, you still have sea vegetables that are not as radioactively contaminated, so there's a variety of sea vegetables that absorb and pull the radiation out of your system. And there's a variety of remedies that generally help as well. So we define the word cure as a blood sugar less than 100, which is the classical definition, and no diabetes medication. That's what we find, because that's the accepted definition. So that's what we're using. Now, on our live food, organic, veganic program, which is a 3-week program, after 3 weeks, only 61% of the non-insulin dependent diabetics are healed by this definition. 24% of the insulin dependent diabetics are healed. A lot more get healed later, but we're talking 3 weeks. We're not really, at the Tree of Life, we're not treating type 1s anymore, but when we did, 21% of the type 1s were healed, meaning off insulin, and a blood sugar less than 100, and 31% were off insulin, but their blood sugar was more than 100.
That's a loaded question.
The whole understanding of what diabetes is about. It's not about blood sugar. Diabetes is a chronic degenerative syndrome in which the genetic and epigenetic programs are downregulated, which results in leptin and insulin and glucagon signaling imbalances, which then creates an imbalance in what we call blood sugar. Okay, and it's brought on by a diet high in sugar and animal products, white flour, white sugar, junk food more specifically. Dr. Cleve, in his book, The Saccharine Disease in 1975, points out that the main cause of diabetes is the introduction of white flour, white sugar, and junk food into a society, and when it is introduced in 20 years, there's an outbreak of diabetes. Then we have the animal products, and then we have the a low fiber diet, low exercise, high stress, inadequate sleep, and also exposure to the pesticides, herbicides, and radiation. So, and electromagnetic forces. So there are many forces that are aggravating the diabetes. Sugar is still the main cause. We have some theories about it. What we know with all the research is out there is that animal products increase the rate of diabetes 35 to 50% in 12 very well done studies that were combined into one. So we don't know why, but we know clinically there's an association. Well, if a person's brain has an inadequate nutrition, it can't work as well. And that inadequate balance then creates a whole lot of mental imbalance. So we get a 90% reversal of depression by simply adding all the nutrients, supplements, creating a lifestyle, the long-chain omega-3s, neurotransmitter precursors into individualized diet that helps people do that. But we also include meditation and yoga and a connection with the divine as part of the overall program. So that's one kind of big piece of the story. Now, we have a increase since 1850 of 100 times more completely disabled, mentally disabled people as of 2005. And as we look at that story, paradoxically, it appears, is it's very much correlated with the use of antipsychotics, use of antidepressants, and use of anti-anxieties. To be specific, research done at the National Institute of Mental Health, summarizing in a nutshell, is the longer these medications are used and the higher doses, the harder it is to reverse the degenerative process. And what do I mean by that? In 1996, Dr. Mark Hyman, head of the National Institute of Mental Health, said, all we know is that these drugs create a perturbation in the neurotransmitter systems. We'll go a step further. Other research has shown it actually changes the structure of the brain, particularly what we call the basal ganglion, hippocampal areas, cortical areas. And so they create a little bit of a, I'm going to say, a brain degenerative process. And moving people really from, let's say, depression and with the antipsychotics into manic depression and long-term antipsychotic use, which has been distinctly associated with much lower functioning and a much higher rate of mental disability. Now, these are the data online. The truth is, when we look at that antipsychotics have a much poorer record than treating people without antipsychotics. It is a significant difference. When we measure a psychiatrist in your, what we call 5-year relapse. So the amount of 5-year relapse you get with antipsychotics is not only higher, but there's much more disability. So what we see is people who are treated and managed without medication not only have less 5-year relapse and 3-year relapse, but they're much more functionable. Because when people are putting these drugs, their function goes down and they move into the mentally disabled, the SSI. Okay? Same is true with depression medications. And with the anti-anxiety drugs, it's a little different. They, like all the drugs, may look better in the first few weeks. But with anti-anxiety drugs, without mentioning the drugs, that they get some relief immediately, and up to 4 weeks. In 4 to 8 weeks, it breaks even, and from 8 to 23 weeks, people actually get worse. And then if they try to withdraw, they have 4 times more anxiety and significantly more panic attacks. So really, people are worse with these medications in the long run. They may get some temporary relief in the short run.
And nutrition is a way to help them recover from that?
Well, what nutrition does is it rebuilds the whole system so your brain functions better.
Got it.
And all the other causes are ameliorated. Like a great many people with psychosis and depression have hypoglycemia, for example. People with diabetes have 3 to 4 times more depression. So there's all this interface. So as we heal the physical body and we look at the depression and say, well, what's the cause of the depression? Well, you could have allergies. Okay, you could have electromagnetic sensitivities. You could have diabetes, hypoglycemia. In other words, there's many causes. You can have hypothyroidism. So you can't just lob an antidepressant drug at somebody and think you're going to make any difference, because not only have they not been proven to work, but the point is it's very nonspecific. So that's one of the reasons why there's, in effect, all the research is suggesting not any efficacy, but people are worse as a result. Because one of the side effects of your antidepressants is moving people from depression to manic depression, which then gets you into being treated with antipsychotics, and then that moves you into chronic disability. And that's why we have literally 100 times more mentally disabled people now as of 2005 as compared to 1850. And it's directly correlated to the use of antipsychotics, Thorazine in 1955, and the use of the SSRIs that kind of came out around 1985.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
it's quite impressive what's there. And this is all written up in different books and so forth.